This is the Reading Instruction Show. I'm your host, as always, the genial one, Dr. Andy Johnson. Topic: dyslexia is not a brain disorder. A lot of the information here comes from my book, Designing Meaning-Based Interventions, and that's published by Guilford. And there you see the reading instruction. So let's define our terms. Always important to do that up front. Dyslexia is an inability to learn to read that is of unknown origin. It is not the kid can't sound out words, and that's the common thought. Well, the kid can't sound out words. Well, sounding out words is often part of dyslexia, but not always. It's often an effect of something, but not always, and all struggling readers are not the same. That's an important concept. All struggling readers are not the same. To understand dyslexia, one must understand first the reading process. This is what reading is not. This is called the phonological processing model. It is a weak theory versus a robust theory. According to this theory, words appear on the page. There's a one-way flow of information from the page to your thalamus and up to the cortex. A weak theory means there's just a few data dots to connect versus a robust theory that has a lot of data dots. Reading is not sounding out words, and it's often taught as if it was. It's often assessed as if it was. Dyslexia is often assessed as a sounding out word disorder. Reading is creating meaning with text. It's a meaning-making endeavor. It's what we do when we see print. It's what the human brain naturally does when it looks out upon the world. Reading is created with print, not sounding out words. That's why these screeners, where they ask students to identify a list of words or nonsense words in isolation, is not a valid assessment of reading. There's no meaning making going on here. They're not able to use all the information. This is the outdated bottom-up view of reading. Input, thalamus, phonological processing, and then up to memory. That's the outdated, and that's one that the International Dyslexia Association ascribes to some form of this bottom-up theory of reading. Now, a neurocognitive view, a neurocognitive theory, or an interactive reading theory is a robust theory. It accounts for a lot of data and explains a lot of phenomena. Reading is creating meaning with print, not sounding out words or recognizing words or identifying words or decoding words. And by the way, identify, recognize, decode, these all mean different things. Now, read this, and I'll pause. That's Latin for that. Reading's creating meaning with print, not simply sounding out words. If you're not creating meaning, you are not reading. You are merely responding to stimuli. This is a very low-level skill. Now, notice the difference in your eyes. If you look, when you're reading this, your eyes probably went more like this. When you weren't creating meaning, your eyes went more like this. Notice the difference, and just take a minute to notice your eye movement. That's an interesting thing to begin to notice, the difference. We use what's in our head to create meaning, to understand what's out there in the world, to perceive. These are just black and white dots, but we use what's in our head to see a dog. There's the dog. Looks like that's the shadow of a tree. We do that with print as well. We read with our brain. Our brain helps fill in the blanks. Recognizing words is one part of reading, and recognizing words means you see it in print, It's in your lexicon file folder in your head, and you automatically know what it is. That's to recognize words. And our brain is cueing. We have three interactive and interdependent systems cueing the brain as to what the word is: semantic, syntactic, and phonetic. And these work together, and a little bit more on that in just a minute. Well, there's more on it right now. 3 cueing. Let's address that. Most people create a cartoon version of what they think 3 cueing is, and they have no idea. 3 cueing essentially is developing what the brain does naturally to enable it to recognize words automatically and create meaning more efficiently. It's a theory. It is not teaching. It's not a skill that you teach students. Oh, they're teaching 3 cueing. You don't know what 3 cueing is. It's not a teaching strategy. It's not an approach to teaching. It includes a phonics instruction. If you're against something, by the way, you should know something about that something you're against. Yes? It does not teach children to guess at words. It does not teach children to look at pictures. It is not a communist plot to destroy America. And we'll get to this in just a minute. But the National Reading Panel report back in 2000, they identified 5 elements that are key to reading instruction and reading success. And these are the big 5: comprehension, fluency, vocabulary, phonics, and phonemic awareness, being aware of the sounds, manipulate sounds within words. They came up with this. And you say, brilliant, groundbreaking. But we have been doing the 5 pillars all along. This was not something new that this group came up with. And as a matter of fact, they started with the big 5 and looked for studies that supported each of the big 5. They didn't look at the field and induce order and get their categories from the field. They started with the categories. So of course they came up with the big 5. They found what they were looking for. But the big 5 are 7 pillars short of a full load. These are necessary but not sufficient. A neurocognitive approach recognizes there's 12 interacting and interdependent elements. These are systems. They don't work in isolation. There are no algorithm. An algorithm is like a mathematical formula. If you follow it, you're guaranteed to get to the right answer at the end. If you use this product, if you use Orton Gillingham with fidelity, you're guaranteed to get to successful teaching at the end. Well, teaching isn't like that. Here you see the big 5, but there are 7 more that they didn't include. This is called a systems theory of reading, interacting and interdependent parts. We can't pull each part together and try to create the whole. Now think about this. Which column do you think will enable all students with reading difficulties, to achieve their full literacy potential? Now the science of reading, for all their talk about the big 5, they tend to focus on the little 2. You get a whole bunch of that. That's a naive view of reading and reading instruction. They say the big 5 is important, but very rarely do they do these, or do they do them correctly. The big 12, systems theory, neurocognitive approach. This is more apt to create students who can achieve their full literacy potential. If I had a struggling reader going to school, I would want to help that child reach his or her full potential. I'd go for column 1, systems theory of reading. Now, in this theory, this is a fact, and theory accounts for this. Brain imaging studies show there's 10 times more information flowing from the cortex down to the thalamus than the thalamus up. When we are reading, it's not a one-way flow of information. We have almost 10 times more information flowing down as we're creating meaning. And we use not just the phonological, but 3 interactive and interdependent systems to recognize words. And again, instead of information just going up here, we see the information coming down here and going out. Information in the head to make sense. That figure there, when it's read that way, we see it as a B. Read this way, we see it as a 3. The cat, same symbol, we see it as an H there and an A there. Our brain is filling in the blanks. It's inefficient to think that we're trying to capture and record reality like a camera. Now, here's the 3 cueing systems. We use the context of the sentence to recognize the what. Most people are able to see that as word. We use grammar, word order, sentence structure, that is syntax, to create meaning. And we used phonics, letters and sounds, absolutely, all 3 of these systems, they work together. In terms of processing time, this is the least efficient. Now, this does not mean that we do not teach phonics. Absolutely not. It's not the what of phonics. It's the how of phonics and how much of phonics in which there are differences. We develop in a meaning-based approach all 3 of the brain's cueing systems because we want children to develop their full potential. Now, these are different. Word recognition, again, you see the word and you automatically know what it is. Your 3 cueing systems are working interdependently. You don't have to stop and figure it out. You don't have to sound it out. You automatically know what it is. Word identification, you see the word, it's in your lexicon, but you don't recognize it. This is where you need to stop and consciously employ one of these strategies. I don't recognize that. Let me see. Now, often we say, well, sound it out. The kid could sound it out. The kid wouldn't have stopped. Duh, sound it out. Never thought of that before. Phonics is one. Context, analogy, and morphemic analysis. We teach children to do all 4 of these strategies. And the goal is automaticity, so they become automatic. You teach the process, you teach the strategy, the process to develop the skill, so they do it automatically. So they automatically look for parts or context clues, prefix, suffix. Phonics is not the key to unlocking reading. Here's the unimportance of letters. We don't read letter by letter in a serial fashion. No, we use minimal letter clues and read using parallel processing, things going on at the same time. I'm not going to get too deep into that. But how important are vowels? Here's the text with all but the initial vowels removed, and I'm guessing most of us can create meaning with that. Once upon a time, there was a handsome prince. Interesting. Are those vowels so gosh darn important? What about vowels versus consonants? All right, I'm going to take a sentence. I'm going to take all the consonants out. And if those vowels are so gosh darn important, you should be able to tell me what that sentence is. Go on, read it. Are those vowels actually that important? What about this? All the vowels taken out, all the consonants taken out, all the vowels taken out. Doesn't mean that vowels aren't unimportant, but let's put them in context, shall we? We don't have to master all these sounds. Here's something. You know what these words are. Yes, you do. I'll bet you $20 you know what a splammer is, and you know what it means to expatiate. I I would like some more coffee. Would you splammer some coffee in my cup? Most people know. Okay, pour. Yeah, that makes sense. You're using context. He drank too much vodka, got sick, and asphyxiated all over the floor. It was really gross. Well, you know. Throw up, puke, vomit, barf. Yes, you're using context. Context. And notice when you read that, your eyes are going kind of like this. Here's a word you weren't familiar with. So your eyes probably went whoop, 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 went back and forth a couple times. Our eyes move like hummingbirds across the page, taking little snapshots called fixations. They don't move in a straight line. But I'm going to make you dyslexic. Yes, I am. Magic. All right, take a minute. Read that as fast as you can. All right, some of you got through it, some of you didn't. All right, here's where the magic comes. You're going to read the same 110 words, but it's going to be different because I'm going to make you dyslexic. Psh, you're all dyslexic. You're all dyslexic. Ready? Go. Most of you are going, oh wait, drove and car, his in jump, could he as fast as ran Billy. You're sounding like a struggling reader, aren't you? You're reading word by word instead of like this. Notice how your eye movements changed. If I was full of baloney and there weren't three cueing systems, if reading were simply sounding out words, you would be able to read that just as fluently and as quickly as that. But it's not true. There are three cueing systems. Here our eyes travel like this in smooth lines going back and forth. Here our eye movements differ, more static, more staccato, as it were. Speed, fluency, and eye movements are all different. Same 110 words, one had them backwards, so you couldn't use syntax and semantics. That, my friends, is key to understanding the three cueing systems. All right, let's understand dyslexia if we can. Now, 12 to 20% of all students have mild to moderate reading difficulties. I like difficulties better than disabilities. That means if you put them all on a normal curve in a normal population, yes, you're going to have 20% that fall here. That's called normal. Half of your students are going to be above the mean or the average mean, and some below. That's called normal. Normal. 3 to 5% are going to have a severe reading difficulty. I like difficulty. And that's the word we use, dyslexia, for these 2%. And in any normal population, you're going to have students at either end of the spectrum. That's called normal. Doesn't mean we try to get them to move up, but that's called normal. Here's something to think about. Little Sally cannot learn how to play the piano. After years of instruction, she is at the second percentile. She's right there after years of perception. When compared with her same age peers, and by the way, these scores, they merely compare you to your peers, a normal population. They tell you how far a child is away from average. All right, Sally. Would you say she has a brain disorder? Would you say she has a piano playing disorder? What type of screening would you use to identify piano playing disorders? Would you compare her brain to piano players? What type of piano playing intervention would you use? Think about that. Reading music is to playing as reading text is to reading. Not exactly the same, but would you say that Sally has a brain disorder because she cannot learn how to play the piano? No, she just has trouble processing the little dots and where her fingers go. Dyslexia is an inability to learn to read that is of unknown origin. We don't exactly know what it is. Student with dyslexia is one who is ineffective in the use or coordination of strategies used to create meaning with print. It's not a brain disorder. Here's 11 things you should know. The International Literacy Association. There's no empirical basis for the use of the term dyslexic to distinguish a group of children who are different from others experiencing difficulty in acquiring literacy. Dyslexia is simply a name for students at this lowest end of the continuum. Their brains function just the same. Here are two excellent sources I would recommend unto you. It's not a brain disorder. There's no reliable evidence to show that the brains of students with dyslexia are any different than the brains of other students, despite what the little pictures show you online, the flashy images. Brain imaging research, there are methodological concerns with these, and I'm not going to get into the weeds too much on that. But here's the thing. They show brains that light up and brains that don't light up. Oh, here's the dyslexic brain. Like you're a leper, they give you a title. You're a leper, you're a dyslexic. That's not person first language. This is non-impaired. This is impaired, okay? They notice that areas light up, areas don't light up. But many of these differences can be explained by instruction and experience. These differences largely disappear with the right kinds of instruction and evidence or experience. This is in effect not a cause. With the right kind of instruction, these brains look similar. Not exactly the same, but similar. Eye and visual problems don't cause dyslexia. You know, they looked at some struggling readers and they noticed, their eyes go like this, whereas non-struggling readers, their eyes went like this. And some people said, it's eye movement. That's correlation. Two things occurring at the same time. No, eye movement does not cause dyslexia. It's an effect. Notice how you struggled. Remember when you read that, when you became a dyslexic, how your reading, your eye movements differ. Vision therapy, there's no scientific evidence to support vision therapy of any kind. The differences in eye movements between struggling and non, it's a result of difficulties. It's not the cause of reading instruction. What about the common idea that dyslexia, you reverse the letters? Well, here's the thing. Letter reversal is common in the early stages of learning to read and write. Students with dyslexia don't jumble up words or mix up letters to any greater degree than students reading at the same level, younger students, readers of similar ability. Let's say a fourth grader reading at the first grade level and a first grader reading at the first grade level. The levels are the same and the mix-ups and reversals are the same. That's normal. That's normal. Now, students with dyslexia do often have difficulties analyzing and processing phonological data. Yes, often, but not always the case. The types of word reading errors they make are similar to all struggling readers or beginning readers at the same level. But yes, they often do have trouble with phonological data. So what do? You go give them more phonics so they can do more of what they're not good at to an even greater degree. You're teaching a one-handed person how to clap. If you have trouble with phonics, and not all struggling readers have trouble with phonics, well, that's when you also develop the syntactic and the semantic cueing systems. And that's another one. Students with dyslexia often have difficulties with spelling. Yes, they do. Spelling is related to visual memory capacity, the ability to store and retrieve letter patterns. There are many fine readers who have trouble spelling. Spelling has little, not nothing, but little to do with creating meaning with print. Here's a good one. The drill and practice, the weekly spelling tests. There is no research to support that helps students become better spellers. Does little to enhance their ability to create meaning with print. Science of reading, we must use science when we make decisions about reading policy and practice. More phonics is not the answer. Phonics-based instruction, we're all looking for the magic answer, the simple answer. Well, they just need more phonics. Give the kid more phonics. Okay. Phonics instruction can lead to increased scores on phonics-based measures. Absolutely. You get a little bump if you teach phonics. Absolutely, but there's a little persistence. That means those differences don't continue, and that score doesn't transfer to real life reading situations. You're teaching phonics over here, you get the bump in scores, but they're reading over there. There's little evidence that this phonics-based instruction enhances students' ability to create meaning with print. The National Reading Panel says phonics instruction should be part of a balanced reading program, a balance between teaching skills and practicing those skills in authentic reading and writing contexts. There's no evidence. There are no evidence to show that standardized research-based programs are effective in helping students with dyslexia. There's no evidence to support Wilson reading or Orton-Gillingham multi-sensory, this one-size-fits-all program. Now, two things. Research is different from doing a study or collecting data. Research that is research is subjected to blind peer review. And thing number two, Orton-Gillingham likes to say it's research-based. Well, in any program or package, there's always parts of it that are research-based. Yes, direct instruction has a strong research-based evidence for teaching low-level skills, but just because that one little thing in your program is research-based doesn't make the whole program research-based. I'm 60% water, the human body is. That does not make me a lake. Having parts of a program that are research-based does not make the program research-based. When I say research, is there research to support that Orton-Gillingham enhances students' ability to create meaning with print or teachers' ability to teach? And has Orton-Gillingham been compared to a similar type of program? That's the research we're looking for. Now, students with dyslexia don't need dramatically different kinds of instruction. There's no training, there's no programs. They need more intensive versions of good classroom instruction. Why do they need that? You want to avoid what's called a splintered curriculum. If you're doing reading class here and you're going off for an intervention and doing something else there, you fragment kids and they're experiencing different things. You need consistency of instruction between reading and the intervention. You need to consistently reinforce these developing skills. The difference is in emphasis, in intensity, not in kind. The difference of instruction. And I hope to show you that with that. So they need more intense instruction. Intensity means more time on task, engaged, more time engaged in authentic literacy activities, reading for real life purposes to enjoy or understand, and writing to express your ideas, and smaller instructional groups. That's what more intensity is. And Students with dyslexia need expert reading teachers. Expert reading teachers are not teachers who have a bunch of strategies. We think that we can just teach a bunch of strategies, and that's what teaching is knowing a bunch of strategies. No, it is understanding the concepts and knowledge and research. You understand theory and research related to literacy learning, theories, research, assessment, pedagogy, not just a now do this kind of thing. So what does an intervention look like? And this comes from my book, by the way. Any intervention should enhance, not replace, good classroom instruction. In a good classroom, there's a lot of writing going on, reading and writing. That connection has been firmly established. That's one of the best ways to develop the syntactic cueing system, but you can use it to reinforce letter patterns. These don't have to be long. These can be anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes a day. But in reading instruction, there should be some writing. Now, if you have a deficit related to phonics or word recognition or identification, there should be some word work, absolutely. But, there should be large unit phonics, analytic phonics, and synthetic phonics. Synthetic phonics, most people, when they think of direct instruction, they think of only synthetic phonics, putting letters and sounds together. The National Reading Panel identifies 6 types of phonics instruction and says all are equally effective. Analytic phonics, pulling words apart. Large unit phonics, that is looking for patterns. Word buildings, word sorts. You want this done within a meaningful context to the greatest extent possible. Word work. That means within real books. Here, this is a guided reading instruction where she's using real books to teach letter sounds and patterns to a small group. Close and maze activities to develop students' ability to use context. That is showing a sentence with a word missing, with 1 letter clue, or with 3 words and they have to choose. These again are 3 to 8 minutes. And you can use this as well to reinforce phonics if you're all concerned about that. Fluency activities. You don't teach fluency, you have activities to develop fluency. Repeated reading activities, the neurological impress method, sometimes called scaffolding. Cognitive processes related to comprehension and high-level thinking, all right? We teach the process to develop the skill. This is different from comprehension worksheets. And self-selected reading practice. This should be part of every reading experience. And the last thing, this is what a balanced literacy looks like. Daily reading practice, social conversation, authentic writing, all 3 cueing systems, 4 word identification, comprehension, activities to develop word knowledge. Okay, this has been the Reading Instruction Show. Sorry, I was finishing up a recording.
I just had called. Are you free to just drive to the U-Haul and get a thing reserved?
Yes, I'll put on some pants.